The air on Christmas Eve was always thick with a tension that smelled like pine needles and resentment. I handed a small, heavy box to my father, David, a man who believed love was a spectacle. Inside was a vintage 1968 Seamaster watch, the one he'd pointed out in a magazine months ago, sighing about how they don't make things that last anymore. He opened it, gave a thin-lipped smile, and offered a lukewarm thanks. Then he set it on the coffee table beside a pile of discarded wrapping paper, $2,000 afterthought. My chest felt hollow. A few minutes later, my brother, Brandon, the family's charismatic golden boy who never faced a single consequence, tossed a box into Dad's lap. It was a $10 ceramic mug with "World's Best Dad" printed in a goofy font. My father's face lit up with a blinding, performative joy. He hugged Brandon, declaring the mug was the best gift he'd ever received. The internal ledger, in my mind, clicked. The price of the watch versus the price of the mug, the months of saving versus the minutes spent at a checkout counter. The math never added up. Then, as if on cue, the Wi-Fi cut out, killing the holiday movie marathon. Every head in the room turned to me, the unpaid on-call technician for every family problem. As I was rebooting the router, Brandon laughed and said, "You're always so serious. You just don't know how to have fun." I didn't say anything, but the words pricked at my skin like tiny needles. It was the same old song, just a different verse. That was all the opening my father needed. He pointed a finger at me, his face twisted with a sudden, vicious anger. His voice cut through the strained silence like a razor. "It's because you ruin every holiday," he snapped. "Nothing is ever just easy with you." And in that moment, hearing those words, something inside me didn't just break. It went quiet, because he was right. In a way, the holidays were always ruined. I just finally realized I wasn't the cause. I was the cure. That cold silence in my room on Christmas Eve was a familiar one. It was the sound of my own value being calculated and dismissed, a sound I'd been hearing my whole life. To understand the story, you have to understand the players. There was my brother, Brandon, the family's charismatic but utterly useless golden child. He was a master of failing upwards. He could drop out of a college course and somehow end up with a new car, while I could earn a scholarship and get a stern lecture on the importance of not getting a big head. He was the sun, and we were all just planets orbiting his gravitational pull of need. And then there was my mother, Susan, a woman who acted as the chief enabler for my father's every whim. She saw Brandon's constant failures not as flaws, but as sensitive struggles that required endless patience and funding. My achievements, on the other hand, were simply what was expected. They weren't a cause for celebration. They were just my duty. And my father, David, he was a man who measured his love in grand gestures that he, conveniently, never had to pay for. He loved playing the role of the generous patriarch, the man who provided these incredible experiences for his family, basking in the glow of their gratitude. The only problem was, his generosity was a fiction and I was the ghostwriter. The most glaring example came on Brandon's 21st birthday. He had just called home to announce he was dropping out of the semester, his second time doing so. His reward for this spectacular failure was a lavish party and a grand announcement from our parents. They were sending him on a trip of a lifetime. To Europe, too. And I quote, "Find himself." The price tag was $10,000. I knew this because I overheard them discussing it. The same week they told me they couldn't help with my textbook fees. I was working 2 jobs to put myself through school, and I was still expected to chip in for his party gift. My contribution was just another log on the fire to keep the golden child warm. 2 years later, it was my turn for a milestone, my college graduation. I had finished with honors, the first in our family to even get a degree. I called home and asked, with a knot of hope in my stomach, if they might fly out for the ceremony. There was a pause on the line, and then my mother's voice, full of gentle regret. "Money was just too tight right now," she explained. "It wouldn't be responsible." So, I did what I always did. I took the hit. I used the money I'd saved for a security deposit on an apartment to buy my own plane ticket home, because I still foolishly believed that celebrating with them was important. The celebration turned out to be a casual weekend barbecue in the backyard. My graduation was mentioned once, in passing. The main event, the real cause for celebration, was Brandon's recent promotion from junior salesman to junior salesman with a slightly larger territory. I watched my father clap him on the back, beaming with more pride for that tiny, insignificant step than he ever had for my 4 years of relentless work. I sat there, holding a paper plate of potato salad, and felt the familiar, cold weight of the internal ledger. His minor promotion outweighed my entire degree. It was just another transaction confirming my place in the family. I wasn't a daughter to be celebrated, I was a resource to be managed. This was the false narrative our family was built on. It was a story they all told themselves so they could sleep at night. The story said that Brandon needed the help, the support, the endless river of cash. He was creative and unlucky. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. My success wasn't something to be proud of, it was a utility. My paychecks weren't my own, they were a safety net for the whole family, and especially for him. My dad didn't see me as his daughter, he saw me as his secret bank. And nowhere was this more obvious than with the holidays. For the last 5 years, I was the one who made the magic happen. I was the one scouring flight deals, booking the beachfront hotels, putting the non-refundable deposits for tours and cruises on my own credit card. I'd forward the confirmations to my dad, and a week later, he would gather us all together and announce his grand, generous gift to the family. He'd soak up the applause, the hugs, the praise for being such a wonderful provider, while I sat there silent. I was the architect of the memories he took credit for. The holidays he accused me of ruining were holidays that would not have existed without me. Lying in bed that Christmas Eve, my dad's words echoing in my ears, I realized the narrative was the only thing holding their world together. And I was about to become the editor. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked back to my room, closed the door, and the storm inside me finally broke. But it wasn't a storm of tears or rage. It was a wave of absolute, chilling clarity. The part of me that had spent a lifetime begging for their love for a crumb of acknowledgement had finally died on the living room floor. The goal was no longer to be loved, it was to be seen. And I was going to make sure they saw everything. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen pushing back the darkness. Instead of searching for ways to fix our family, I opened a blank spreadsheet, a new kind of ledger. Column A, holiday or vacation. Column B, expense description. Column C, the cold hard number I had paid. And then came the most important column, the one that made my breath catch. Column D, who took the credit. I worked backwards through the years, and with each line item I entered every flight, every hotel, every celebratory dinner. The quiet fury in my chest grew colder and harder, like ice thought the linchpin of it all was the big one they had been talking about for months, a 10-day luxury trip to Hawaii for my parents' anniversary. I had, of course, been pressured into booking it all, under the usual flimsy promise of being paid back later, a promise that had never, not once, been kept. This trip, my mother had said, was the one that would bring us all closer together. I pulled up the confirmation emails, my face impassive. First-class airline tickets, a sprawling beachfront suite at a 5-star resort, reservations for a private boat tour, and an exclusive luau. The total was staggering. It was more than my entire savings. The plan formed in my mind, not in a flash of anger, but with the slow, deliberate precision of a master architect. I wasn't going to cancel a thing. I was going to let them pack their bags. I would let them drive to the airport, giddy with excitement for the grand vacation my father was so generously providing. I would even let them board the plane and fly 6,000 miles across the ocean. The reckoning wouldn't be a messy, tearful confrontation. It would be a quiet, surgical strike delivered from half a world away. When they were at their most comfortable and I was completely out of reach. I had the spreadsheet, I had the confirmation emails, I had the key to their paradise and the power to turn it into an island prison. The reservation was in my name, everything was in my name. I let my phone buzz on the counter, ignoring the string of notifications from the family group chat. First came the picture of them grinning at the airport, then one of Brandon with his feet up in first class, a glass of champagne in hand. The caption read, "Thanks, Dad, you're the best." I looked at the photos without a trace of emotion, my own reflection showing a calm face in the dark screen. Back home, I was sitting in my favorite armchair, a warm cup of tea steaming in. My hands, I checked the time, calculated their flight's arrival, the baggage claim, the shuttle to the resort. I waited until I knew, with absolute certainty, that they would be standing at that polished check-in desk, radiating smug satisfaction. Then, I picked up my phone and made my own call to the hotel. I spoke to the concierge in a calm, polite voice, providing the reservation number and my name. I confirmed my identity and then made the request. "I'm so sorry for the last-minute change," I said, my voice smooth as silk, "but I need to cancel the entire package. The rooms, the tours, all of it, effective immediately." I imagined the scene on their end, the friendly concierge's smile faltering as he typed, his expression shifting to one of polite confusion, then professional apology as he turned to face my father. I pictured my dad's jovial, expansive, mood first turning to irritation, then to a dawning, panicked horror as he was told the multi-thousand-dollar reservation he'd been boasting about for weeks had simply vanished. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. The screen screamed, "Dad." I took a slow sip of my tea, let it ring one more time for effect, and then answered with a quiet, "Hello." The explosion on the other end was instantaneous, a torrent of rage and confusion. So loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He was yelling about incompetence, about embarrassment, about how I had somehow screwed this all up. I didn't interrupt. I just let him burn himself out, waiting for the moment his fury would collapse under its own weight, leaving a vacuum of sputtering silence. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was even devoid of the anger he so clearly expected. "You said I ruin every holiday," I stated, as if discussing the weather, "so I decided to sit this one out." Along with my wallet. He was silent for a second, the gears in his mind grinding, failing to comprehend. As he started to sputter again, I clicked my mouse. "I just sent you an email, Dad. You should open it." I could hear my mother's panicked voice in the background, asking what was going on. I heard him fumbling with his phone. The email had a simple subject line, "Holiday Expense Report." The only attachment was the spreadsheet. "The truth, let me walk you through it," I said, my voice patient, like a teacher with a particularly slow student. "You see that first tab? That's Christmas, 3 years ago. The flights to the ski lodge, that was $1,800 on my credit card. Now, go to the next tab. Thanksgiving, the year before. Remember that huge dinner you hosted for the extended family? The one everyone still talks about. You took the credit. I paid the $400 catering bill." I went on, line by line, year by year. Brandon's birthday trip, their last anniversary, every grand gesture, every perfect holiday memory he had curated and claimed as his own. I laid bare as a transaction funded by the daughter he invisible. The sounds on the other end were telling. My father's sputtering had stopped, replaced by a choked, ragged breathing. I could hear my mother starting to weep. I heard Brandon, for the first time in his life, utterly speechless, mumbling, "No. No way." The rage was gone. The power had vanished. All that was left was the humiliating, naked truth echoing down the phone line from thousands of miles away. "Oh," I added, as if I'd almost forgotten, "I canceled your return flights. The cancellation policy was actually pretty flexible." A long, dead silence. Then, my father's voice, a pathetic ghost of what it had been moments before. "But how are we supposed to get home?" It was the last, desperate grasp for the old dynamic for me to fix the problem he had created. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just finality. "I guess you'll have to be the responsible one for a change." He hung up. I didn't feel rage, or joy, or even revenge. I just felt the immense, deafening quiet of a weight I had carried, my entire life finally being set down. I was free. The silence on my end of the line was followed by an immediate, digital storm. My phone began to vibrate incessantly, a frantic, buzzing panic attack on my coffee table. First came the texts from my father, each one a volcanic eruption of capital letters and exclamation points, calling me every name he could think of. Then came my mother's messages, dripping with manipulative guilt. "You are tearing this family apart," one read. "Your father is devastated. How could you be so cruel?" The final stage was the most pathetic, pleading voicemails, promising they'd figure it out and pay me back. The same empty words I'd been hearing for a decade. I listened to one, then deleted them all. One by one, I pulled up their names: father, mother, Brandon, and pressed block. The vibrations stopped. The silence was bliss. A week later, a call came from a number I hadn't seen in years. It was my mother's sister, a distant aunt who always preached the gospel of family, sticking together no matter what. Her voice was thick with a syrupy, secondhand sorrow. She'd heard the story, their version of it at least. She spoke of my father's broken heart and my mother's distress, gently suggesting that whatever had happened, it was my duty to forgive. I listened patiently, without interrupting her sermon. When she was finished, I simply said, "I understand why you're calling. I'm going to email you something that will provide a little more context." I hung up, attached the spreadsheet to a new email, and sent it without a single word in the body. My aunt never called me back. Her silence was the only validation I needed. A year can change everything. Or, in some cases, it can prove that some things will never change, ends up changing everything for you. I moved a few months after the Hawaii incident, not to anywhere glamorous or exotic, but to a small city 3 states away where I knew no one. My new apartment isn't huge, but it has a big window in the living room that lets in the morning light, and I've filled the walls with prints and paintings that I chose, that I paid for, that make me happy. For the first time, my bank account is stable. I'm not suddenly rich, I'm just not perpetually broke from funding the lives of 3 fully grown adults. The feeling isn't wealth, it's peace. It's the quiet hum of a life that is truly my own. My definition of a holiday has changed too. This past Memorial Day, a weekend that used to be a mandatory chaotic family barbecue, I did something radical. I woke up early, drove 2 hours to a state park, and spent the day hiking a trail that led to a waterfall. I sat on a rock for an hour, just listening to the sound of the water, with no one demanding my attention or my money. The day after, I went to a small cafe downtown, ordered a coffee, and read a book for 3 hours straight. My phone didn't buzz with a crisis. No one needed me to be the hero, the villain, or the banker. The sheer unadulterated luxury of that quiet, that was my celebration. I heard about them a while back through a former coworker who was still friends with a cousin. The news was delivered casually, with no knowledge of the backstory. My parents had to sell the house I grew up in. The mortgage was impossible without my silent contributions. My father, now in his 60s, had to take a job in retail, and my mother works as a receptionist. I heard that my brother, Brandon, has a low-wage job that he complains about constantly. Still living at home, still blaming the world for his problems. They never tried to pay me back. They never apologized. They just tell people their sad story, the story of their cruel and grateful daughter who abandoned them for no reason. Hearing that didn't bring me pain. It brought me a final, profound sense of clarity. Their inability to change, their complete refusal to see their own role in their downfall, was the last piece of proof I ever needed. Their love had always been a contract, and I had simply been the first one to finally read the fine print. My value to them was conditional on my utility. By removing myself as a resource, I had, in their eyes, ceased to exist in any meaningful way. My only crime was that I had stopped paying for the privilege of being their daughter. My father was wrong. I didn't ruin holidays. I was the holiday, and now I was celebrating myself. For anyone out there who has ever felt invisible in their own family, know this. You have the right to cancel the reservation. If you've ever had to become your own hero, tell me your story in the comments below. I see you.